Richard took the shot glass out of Robert's hand and threw it out the window.
Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection of me.
It got ugly. It got ugly.
Steven Spielberg may be the most beloved director alive, the man behind Jaws, Jurassic Park, and E.T. But Hollywood insiders whisper about a side of him the public rarely sees. For all his kindness and grandfatherly charm, Spielberg keeps a mental blacklist, a private roll call of actors who crossed him in ways so unforgivable they were erased from his inner circle forever. Some of these names will shock you. Some were rising stars who never recovered. And the reasons they landed on Spielberg's secret list? That's where the story gets unbelievable. Ask anyone in Hollywood, and they'll tell you Steven Spielberg isn't just a director. He's a world builder, a storyteller, a father figure to the people he chooses to trust. For decades, he's been known as the man who can make stars, save careers, and even turn unknowns into household names. When Spielberg brings you into one of his projects, it's more than a job. It's an invitation into his family. Tom Hanks once admitted he doesn't take on a major role without checking in with Spielberg first. That's not just respect. That's a deep level of trust, built over years of collaboration. Harrison Ford has said Spielberg gave him the confidence to protect Indiana Jones's legacy. To actors who've earned it, Spielberg's loyalty is like a shield, a lifelong safety net in an industry notorious for tearing people down. But Spielberg's world isn't a free-for-all. It runs on an unspoken but powerful code. 3 rules that sound simple at first, but to him, they're sacred. Rule 1, come prepared. Not just knowing your lines, but knowing the story, understanding the vision, and showing up ready to deliver. Rule 2, respect the process. Filmmaking is chaos controlled by discipline, and Spielberg expects every actor, from the lead star to the smallest supporting role, to keep that discipline intact. And Rule 3, the most important of all, never, ever put your ego above the story. For Spielberg, the story is everything. It's bigger than one actor's pride, bigger than one person's paycheck. To him, the story is what endures long after the cameras stop rolling. He rewards those who understand that and punishes those who don't. When someone breaks that code, Spielberg doesn't explode. He doesn't rant. He doesn't fight for the tabloids. Instead, he goes quiet. The calls stop coming. The collaborations end. Hollywood is small, and silence from a man as powerful as Spielberg is louder than any scandal. For an actor, being frozen out of Spielberg's circle is like being exiled from the heart of Hollywood itself. It doesn't happen often. After all, Spielberg is patient, forgiving, even nurturing with talent. He's given second chances to actors when others wouldn't. But when that line is crossed, when arrogance, disrespect, or pure recklessness clash with his code, there's no coming back. And the consequences aren't just losing a role. For some, it meant watching their once bright careers flicker and fade without Spielberg's protection. These stories aren't about petty disagreements or creative differences. They're about something deeper. Violations of trust, clashes of values, betrayals so personal, they scarred Spielberg's memory forever. Some of the names on this blacklist will leave you stunned. A few were legends who should have known better. Others were rising stars who learned the hardest lesson of all. In Hollywood, one wrong move can close doors that never open again. So who made Spielberg's private blacklist? And what unforgivable mistakes landed them there? Let's begin with the actor who went from being Spielberg's protege to his most infamous cautionary tale. When Spielberg first spotted Shia LaBeouf, he saw something rare, a kid from the Disney Channel with raw energy, sharp instincts, and just enough charisma to light up a screen. Spielberg wasn't the type to gamble on unproven talent, but with Shia, he sensed potential. So when the time came to revive one of the most beloved franchises in cinema history, Spielberg made the bold choice. He handed LaBeouf the keys to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It should have been the role of a lifetime. Overnight, Shia went from sitcom star to Spielberg's chosen heir to the adventure genre. The industry expected him to climb into Harrison Ford's shoes, and carry the franchise into a new era. Spielberg believed in him so much that insiders whispered he was grooming Shia as his next long-term collaborator, a golden ticket in Hollywood terms. But it didn't take long for cracks to appear. On set, crew members noticed Shia's confidence spilling over into arrogance. Instead of trusting Spielberg's vision, he began questioning it. In front of the cast, in front of the crew, even in front of Harrison Ford himself, Shia would suggest rewrites, challenge directions, and try to improve scenes on the spot. To Spielberg, a man who thrives on collaboration but values respect, this was a red flag. Still, Spielberg gave him grace. He'd worked with difficult talent before, and he believed young actors deserved patience. He tolerated the backtalk, hoping Shia's talent would outweigh his immaturity. But the breaking point wasn't on set, it came later. In 2010, during an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Shia crossed the one line Spielberg could never forgive. He publicly trashed the film that had made him a star. "I feel like I dropped the ball on the legacy that people loved and cherished," Shia said. That was bad enough, but then came the dagger. "You can blame it on the writer, and you can blame it on Steven." With that sentence, Shia did what few dared. He turned on the man who had lifted him to stardom. Spielberg didn't respond publicly. He didn't call him out in interviews or fight in the press. He simply went silent. Shia was quietly removed from all future Spielberg projects. His name disappeared from the director's circle, and the golden ticket was gone. By 2012, when Spielberg was asked about difficult actors, he delivered a line insiders instantly recognized as aimed at Shia. "Gratitude is the foundation of all professional relationships. Without it, talent becomes noise." Shia had talent. But without Spielberg's protection, that talent was drowned out by headlines about erratic behavior, arrests, and bizarre stunts. What should have been a career built on blockbusters turned into a cautionary tale about burning bridges with the wrong man. And Spielberg's silence? That was louder than any blacklist ever could be. But Shia wasn't the only young star who lost everything by crossing Spielberg's unwritten code. Another rising name, one of the most talked-about actresses in the world at the time, found out the hard way that careless words can end an entire career. In the mid-2000s, Megan Fox was Hollywood's golden girl. Striking looks, effortless screen presence, and a breakout role in Transformers turned her into one of the most sought-after young actresses in the world. With Michael Bay directing and Steven Spielberg producing, the franchise had all the power players attached. For Fox, it was the ultimate launchpad, a guaranteed path to A-list status. But if Spielberg's code is built on respect, Fox's downfall came from the opposite: reckless disrespect in the spotlight. At first, the cracks seemed harmless. During press tours for the first Transformers film, Fox gave interviews where she complained about the physical demands of action movies. She compared filming to being in a war zone, a comment Spielberg brushed off as youthful exaggeration. He'd seen plenty of young stars stumble in their early days of fame, and at first he wasn't concerned. But then came 2009. In a now infamous interview with Wonderland magazine, Fox delivered the words that destroyed her Hollywood trajectory. She compared director Michael Bay to Hitler. "He wants to be like Hitler on his sets, and he is. He's a nightmare to work for." The comment was outrageous on its own, but in context, it was career suicide. Spielberg wasn't just a casual producer on Transformers. Michael Bay was his protege. Spielberg had mentored Bay, trusted him, and backed his career from the beginning. To insult Bay in that way was the equivalent of walking into Spielberg's house and spitting on the floor. The response was swift. Industry sources confirm that Spielberg personally called the studio and ordered Fox removed from the third film, Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Michael Bay later confirmed the story in an interview with GQ, bluntly stating, Steven said, "Fire her right now." On paper, the official explanation was that Fox had outgrown the franchise. But Hollywood insiders knew the truth. She had been cut by Spielberg himself, and just like that, Megan Fox went from being on the cusp of superstardom to a cautionary tale. Instead of blockbuster franchises, she was relegated to smaller roles, direct-to-video releases, and years of struggling to repair her reputation. For Spielberg, it was a simple decision. Fox had violated his code of respect in a way that couldn't be undone. The message was clear. Talent might get you through the door, but one careless insult can slam it shut forever. But Fox wasn't the only major star who found themselves erased from Spielberg's world. Even one of Hollywood's most beloved leading ladies, fresh off the success of Pretty Woman, managed to burn a bridge so completely that Spielberg never looked back. By 1991, Julia Roberts was untouchable. She had just exploded into global stardom with Pretty Woman, becoming America's sweetheart almost overnight. Studios were throwing millions at her. Magazines couldn't stop putting her face on their covers, and directors were desperate to lock her down before her asking price climbed even higher. So when Steven Spielberg announced his ambitious reimagining of Peter Pan, called Hook, Roberts was the obvious choice for Tinkerbell. At $7 million, she was one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood at the time, and everyone expected magic. But magic is the last word anyone on that set would use to describe what happened next. From the beginning, Roberts clashed with the production. Hook was a demanding shoot. Elaborate sets, flying rigs, heavy visual effects. The kind of technical complexity that requires patience and precision from everyone involved. Spielberg is a perfectionist, but he creates a working environment rooted in trust and collaboration. He expects actors to dive into the challenge with respect for the process. Roberts, however, arrived with an attitude that blindsided the crew. According to those on set, Roberts treated the role as beneath her. She complained about the physical demands of being strapped into harnesses for hours. She rolled her eyes at the intricate special effects setups. Instead of leaning into the fantasy, she dismissed it. And worse, she dismissed Spielberg's direction. The tension grew so thick that Robin Williams, who played Peter Pan, often stepped in just to keep the peace. Dustin Hoffman, already juggling the enormous task of playing Captain Hook, later admitted that the atmosphere was tense, unusually tense for a Spielberg set. The breaking point came during one pivotal sequence, a dramatic confrontation between Tinkerbell and Captain Hook. It was supposed to be a showcase moment for Roberts, one that blended emotion, timing, and technical precision. But when Spielberg tried to guide her through the scene, Roberts snapped. In front of the entire cast and crew, she allegedly told Spielberg that his direction was confusing and unhelpful. For Spielberg, a man known for patience and diplomacy, this was a shocking breach. He had never been spoken to like that in his own domain, least of all by an actor he was paying millions to guide. The film was finished, but the damage was permanent. Roberts may have gone on to become one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, winning an Oscar and commanding top billing for decades. But she never heard from Spielberg again. The director never offered her another role, never mentioned her for a project, never gave her a second chance. Years later, when asked about Roberts during a press junket, Spielberg chose his words carefully, but decisively. Some actors bring light to a set. Others bring shadows. I've learned to work only in the light for Roberts. That one film was enough to land her on Spielberg's blacklist. And her story stands as proof that no amount of fame or talent can save you once you've lost Spielberg's trust. But Roberts wasn't the only world-class talent who failed to click with the director. Even an actor considered one of the greatest of his generation, someone praised for brilliance and intensity, found himself quietly exiled after pushing Spielberg too far. Edward Norton has long been regarded as one of the finest actors of his time. From Primal Fear to Fight Club to American History X, his performances were hailed as nothing short of genius. Critics admired his intensity, audiences loved his versatility, and directors sought him out for roles that demanded depth and complexity. So when Spielberg began casting Munich in 2005, a deeply layered thriller about the Israeli response to the 1972 Olympics massacre, Norton's name was at the top of the list. On paper, it looked like a dream pairing, two perfectionists united by a love of storytelling. But sometimes, perfection collides instead of harmonizes. Norton's reputation preceded him. He was meticulous to the point of obsession, known for rewriting dialogue, dissecting characters line by line, and demanding control over even the smallest choices. Spielberg, too, values preparation, but his strength lies in instinct and efficiency. He knows when to move forward, when a moment is alive, when the camera should roll even if everything isn't perfect. That difference in style would prove disastrous. It began in pre-production. At script meetings, Norton would arrive with pages of notes. He questioned character arcs, challenged lines of dialogue, and sometimes pressed for changes that bent the story toward his personal vision. What Spielberg expected to be collaborative discussions quickly turned into debates. Time that should have been spent shaping the bigger picture got bogged down in microscopic details. On set, the problems escalated. Norton's dedication to realism meant he insisted on multiple takes for emotionally charged scenes, exploring tiny variations in delivery and expression. What was scheduled to be half a day of filming stretched into 3, and frustration began to spread. Other actors, already under the pressure of an intense shoot, started to complain about the delays. The breaking point came during one of the film's most crucial moments, a scene where Norton's character learns devastating news. Norton insisted on exploring every emotional nuance, pushing for dozens of takes, searching for something no one else could see. Spielberg, watching the clock tick and the budget climb, realized they were losing momentum. For a director who built his career on capturing truth in the moment, it was too much. Spielberg let Norton finish the role, and his performance in Munich was widely praised. But insiders say the director left the experience drained, frustrated, and unwilling to repeat it. Later, Spielberg summed it up with a simple but telling reflection. Some actors need to understand everything. Others trust the process. I prefer working with the second kind. Norton's talent was undeniable. But in Spielberg's world, talent is never enough without trust. And after Munich, that trust was gone. Spielberg never called him again. Sean Bean has always carried a reputation as a serious actor. Known for his intensity and tragic roles, he became the kind of performer who could disappear into a character so completely that audiences forgot they were watching an actor at all. That reputation made him a natural fit for Steven Spielberg's gritty World War II epic Saving Private Ryan. In the late 90s, Bean was quietly cast in a surprising role. Not one of the supporting soldiers, but originally as the cynical private who questions the mission's very purpose. For Bean, it was the kind of role that could have defined his career. Working under Spielberg alongside Tom Hanks, in what would become one of the greatest war films ever made, was the kind of opportunity every actor dreams about. But what should have been his big break quickly unraveled. Bean's weapon of choice as an actor has always been method acting. The total immersion into character, refusing to break even when the cameras stop rolling. It's a technique respected when done carefully, but dangerous when pushed too far. On Saving Private Ryan, Bean's immersion into a traumatized soldier began bleeding into real life. From the first days of rehearsal, he refused to drop character. He stayed emotionally detached from the other actors, avoided normal conversation, and carried the psychological weight of his role long after "cut" was called. At first, it was tolerated. Many thought it was just part of his process. But soon, the atmosphere on set began to shift. Tom Hanks later described it as walking on eggshells. Crew members couldn't tell where the performance ended and Bean began. Even during safety briefings, crucial on a film that required explosives, gunfire, and massive stunts, Bean wouldn't let go of the trauma he was channeling. He skipped meals, avoided script discussions, and shut himself away to remain in character. The breaking point came during rehearsals for the film's iconic Omaha beach landing. Surrounded by chaos, explosions, and staged carnage, Bean reportedly broke down completely. Witnesses described it not as acting, but as something closer to a psychological collapse. He screamed, sobbed, and ranted as though he were truly trapped in combat. What was meant to be rehearsal for one of the most complex battle scenes in film history turned into a 2-day shutdown, while Spielberg assessed the situation. Spielberg's decision was swift but quiet. He replaced Bean with Edward Burns, an actor who could deliver the same intensity without losing himself. Bean was thanked, paid, and moved aside, and the film went on to become a masterpiece. Without him, Spielberg never spoke publicly about the incident, but crew members remember his words. "I need actors who can find truth without losing themselves." Some people can't tell the difference Bean's career carried on. Roles in The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones cemented him as a fan favorite. But Spielberg never called again. For the director, method acting that risked safety, stability, and collaboration was a line that could not be crossed. And if Bean's story is one of talent undone by technique, the next chapter is even darker. Because the next name on Spielberg's list wasn't an up-and-comer or a diva. It was his own idol. A man he once worshipped, whose fall from grace became a personal betrayal Spielberg never forgot. To understand Spielberg's heartbreak over Marlon Brando, you have to remember the director's roots. In film school, Spielberg studied Brando obsessively. For him, Brando wasn't just another actor, he was the revolution, the man who had turned screen acting into something raw, natural, and alive. Brando in A Streetcar, named Desire or On the Waterfront, was the reason Spielberg fell in love with cinema in the first place. So, when the young director was invited to observe Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, in the late 1970s, it was like being asked to watch a god at work. Spielberg walked onto that set, expecting to see his idol in full power. What he saw instead would scar him forever. Brando showed up overweight, unprepared, and utterly uninterested in the role he was playing. His legendary instincts, the ones that had changed acting forever, seemed dulled. He refused to memorize lines, forcing other actors to wear cue cards taped to their costumes so he could glance at his dialogue mid-scene. Instead of electrifying the set, he dragged it down. But the most painful moment for Spielberg wasn't watching Brando's decline. It was being personally dismissed by him. The story goes that when Spielberg, still a young filmmaker at the time, tried to speak with Brando about acting technique, Brando brushed him off. He reportedly smirked and said, "You wouldn't understand. You make popcorn movies." For Spielberg, who had built his career on balancing spectacle with storytelling, those words cut deep. It wasn't just arrogance, it was disdain from the man he had worshipped. Years later, when Spielberg had the power to cast anyone in Hollywood, Brando's representatives reached out. Brando wanted in. He wanted a chance to work with the most powerful director alive. But Spielberg never forgot the way his idol had treated him. Every time the opportunity arose, his answer was the same: no. In rare, candid moments, Spielberg admitted the truth. Sometimes your heroes disappoint you. And when they do, it's better to preserve the memory than create new disappointments. Marlon Brando died in 2004, never having worked with Spielberg. For the director, that was by choice. The man he had once revered as a god had revealed himself as mortal, arrogant, careless, and disrespectful to the craft. And for Spielberg, disrespect is the ultimate sin. By 2011, Katherine Heigl had gone from TV darling to Hollywood headline maker. She had broken out on Grey's Anatomy, won an Emmy, and crossed over into films like Knocked Up and 27 Dresses. For a moment, she looked unstoppable, the rare TV star who could command movie stardom. But behind the scenes, whispers were growing. Stories about Heigl being difficult to work with circulated in Hollywood circles. Still, none of that mattered when she got the chance of a lifetime. An audition for Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. The role on the table was Mary Todd Lincoln, the wife of the president, a character of immense historical depth. Spielberg had spent years researching Abraham Lincoln's life, determined to capture every detail with accuracy and respect. For any actress, this was more than a role. It was the chance to join Spielberg's inner circle, to step into the kind of prestige project that could redefine a career. But the opportunity that should have been Heigl's redemption turned into her downfall. According to insiders, Heigl arrived 45 minutes late to the audition. No apology, no explanation. For Spielberg, a man whose sets run like clockwork, that alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But it didn't stop there. When Spielberg began explaining his vision for the film, Heigl interrupted. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. She suggested changes to Mary Todd Lincoln's arc, as if she knew the story better than the man who had spent years immersed in the research. And then came the line that ended it all. When Spielberg asked about her preparation for the role, Heigl reportedly said, "I don't really do research. I prefer to bring my own interpretation to historical characters." The room went silent. For Spielberg, a man who had built his career on meticulous attention to detail, this was the ultimate insult. The audition ended quickly. Heigl never heard from him again. Instead, the role went to Sally Field, who delivered a performance so grounded in research that it earned her an Oscar nomination. Word of Heigl's disastrous audition spread fast in Hollywood. Her reputation, already shaky, was cemented. Within a few years, she went from A-list potential to struggling for roles. Spielberg never mentioned the incident publicly. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. For Katherine Heigl, that one meeting became a turning point. In a single afternoon, she lost not just a role, but the chance to stand alongside Spielberg's chosen family of collaborators. And in Hollywood, that kind of exile is often permanent. Across 5 decades of filmmaking, Steven Spielberg has worked with hundreds of actors. He's launched careers, protected legacies, and built some of the most enduring collaborations in Hollywood history. But his so-called blacklist tells another story. A story about loyalty, respect, and the hidden rules of survival in the industry. Shia LaBeouf learned that gratitude matters more than raw talent. Megan Fox learned that reckless words can end a career overnight. Julia Roberts discovered that even superstardom can't excuse disrespect. Edward Norton proved that perfectionism without trust is poison on set. Sean Bean revealed how method acting can cross dangerous lines. Marlon Brando, Spielberg's own idol, showed how arrogance can shatter even the deepest admiration. And Katherine Heigl became the cautionary tale that attitude matters more than ambition. What connects them all isn't scandal or failure or even talent wasted. It's the fact that they broke Spielberg's code. And once that trust was gone, Spielberg never looked back. He doesn't need to. In a town overflowing with actors desperate for their shot, Spielberg has always found others, professional, grateful, collaborative, who will honor his vision. He doesn't shout. He doesn't feud. He doesn't even explain. He just stops calling. And in Hollywood, silence from Steven Spielberg is the loudest rejection of all. So the question is, which of these stories shocked you the most? Was it the downfall of Shia LaBeouf, the arrogance of Katherine Heigl, or the tragic disappointment of Marlon Brando? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories from behind Hollywood's curtain, secrets the industry doesn't want you to hear, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because this was just one chapter. And trust me, There are plenty more.